All right. So now we're on the right channel. So it'll start showing that we're going live on the right channels. Sorry about that. We're only like 2 minutes off of the start time.
All right.
That shouldn't cause too much of a problem. I don't think. All right. You know
All
what?
right.
I'm going to end it because now I screwed up something.
Wait, now it's right.
Now I'm not. Yeah, but
Now it's
look
good.
at the show details say the casting clocker.
Oh.
There's always something. All right, hold on. I'm gonna try to fix that.
Okay.
But they should see the screen says Porchcast Pottstown.
It does.
Right. And they should know that they're logged into the right place. Today we are talking to Chief.
Make sure you spell it right.
I did.
I before E.
Except after E. And sometimes words like kind.
Right.
Today we're talking to Chief Mick Markovich. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I can see that people are starting to come into the show. We've got a pretty decent amount of watchers, just considering the fact that I just fired up the screen and the stream. People usually start logging in. Don't forget, I know that we have a lot of regular watchers. There's also a lot of regular watchers down here.
We have a lot of folks here in person. It's very exciting.
It is. And what I'm reminding people of is that the chat function is on. And I already have David Charles chiming in and
David.
leaving a comment. Chief Mick Markovich is with us today, and he is here to answer questions from the public. Comments, critique of the Potsdam Police Department. Some people did send their questions and comments into the show. About a couple of weeks ago, you and I started talking. Well, a month. It's been about a month. Yeah.
First started.
Right. And so we've had several conversations. So, Mick, do you mind if I call you that?
No, please do. Mick.
All right.
I actually prefer people to call me Mick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and here's
Well,
what
and also you guys used to work together.
Yeah.
we did.
Right.
He was not the chief, though, when I worked there. He was a
Correct.
sergeant. I think when I first started, you might have been a corporal.
Maybe a corporal. Yep.
When did you get promoted to sergeant? What year?
2005.
Okay, so you were a sergeant when I started.
Okay.
I started in 07.
Okay. That's just when I got moved to crew.
Okay,
I was patrol sergeant.
Yeah.
When you started, I was a patrol sergeant.
right. And then you went over to crew. Then you were in. I think you were in crew when I started.
Okay.
Yeah, because I remember doing a couple of operations with crew.
Yep.
Because you were doing drug task force stuff.
Yep.
Havelock. I want to talk to Havelock.
All right. The executive producer is asking us to take down the overlay.
Okay. I want people to know that they found the right place.
Right.
There we are.
All right.
Chief Mick Markovich is now on the screen. But anyway, I remember doing some drug operation stuff with you and Haverlack and the other guys that were on the county drug task force.
Yep.
We most memorably, and I'm not going to tell too many
We don't
war
have
stories.
too much.
War
We don't
stories.
have time for memory lane, Matt.
But we did.
But we'll take a good story.
We
Let's hear a
did
good story.
serve a warrant over on Charlotte Street. It was on Charlotte between Walnut and Beach. It was a house right on the alley there.
Okay.
And I think
Right. Basically,
Yeah.
in my backyard.
yes. So I'm one of the new guys, right? So new guys,
Yeah.
guess where they get to go?
The FNG.
First.
Right. Yep.
So the door gets hit with a ram. I don't remember who was on the ram, but I'm the guy behind the ram.
Mhm.
Okay, so the door gets hit, blows off. I mean, the door just blows off the hinges, everything. The whole door frame pops out and flies into this living room. And the living room is just packed with all of these dudes that are hanging out and smoking weed. I mean, it's like a typical Friday night party scene. They got
Okay.
their 40 ounces and they're smoking cigarettes and they got their weed going and stuff. And we just explode that house. And there's a guy, like they had no idea what hit him. And there's this guy.
Which is how a raid should happen.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
Right. This came off perfectly.
Right.
This poor dude sitting on the couch, as soon as I get through the door, starts like looking up, and we have to get everybody down on the floor. So I pick him up, I throw him on the floor. I'm not a cop anymore, so I can say that.
Right.
I throw him on the floor, and I'm holding him down, and more guys come in, and we get everybody down. We get the place calmed down, and this guy's underneath me, and I go to get him up, and I can't get him up. And he's like, I'm stuck to something. I'm stuck to something. I can't get up. I'm stuck. When he went down on the ground, a nail from the door frame went into him.
Oh my gosh.
And I was standing on the door frame, which was attached to the dude. So when I'm trying to pull him up, I can't get him up because I'm pulling both him and me. I
And
can't
the
get
nails
him
are
up. And the nails are in.
What?
You think that dude ever went back to a drug house to hang out?
He went back to Philly.
Yeah.
He probably went back.
No extra charge for the tetanus.
Yeah.
Right?
I did feel bad for him though, because at the end of the day, he was not being violent. Nobody was being violent that day. And the
Right.
last thing on his mind was, I'm going to get thrown on the floor by
Of
some
course.
cop.
Right.
And land on a floor full of nails, right?
Board for nails, yeah. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We've got a pretty healthy
Yes,
crowd
we
watching.
certainly do. Thanks for
And
tuning in.
thanks for tuning in. We've got the chief of police here. For the people that just tuned in, we've been taking questions on Ion Potstown and through an email address that we set up called Potstown Reports. We are monitoring Potstown Reports email address with the folks from Ion Potstown
Mhm.
and also Evan Brandt from the Mercury. In fact, this episode is our first episode working in collaboration with those two other organizations, Ion Potstown and Evan Brandt from the Potsdam Mercury. So I'm a little bit nervous tonight because we shot our mouths all over the Tri-County area. And now I want to have a good show,
No pressure.
right?
No pressure.
No
Chief.
pressure, Chief.
No pressure.
Lost
No
my
pressure,
voice
Chief.
already.
But like I was saying before, it's a hell of a lot easier than serving a felony drug
Right.
warrant.
Right.
A lot less stress than that night over on Charlotte
Right.
Street.
It's a lot easier than taking a door down.
Correct. So let's start tearing into it. I do want to let people know that they can put their questions up onto the chat, and I'll get to them as many as possibly can.
Right. We already have some questions that
We're going to start with
that we
those.
fielded prior to the show. So we're going to start with those, and we will get to comments as we can.
As many as I can.
Yep.
What I don't want to do is disrupt the flow of the conversation. So
I got you.
we're going to have to
Yep.
keep an eye on that. The other part of it too is this is a public platform where we're expecting people to be civil
Yes.
and polite.
Yes.
So don't use the chat function thinking you're going to come in here and troll or start a fight with somebody on the chat.
Nope.
I can boot you.
Happy to do
You will
it.
get a warning
Yes.
if you keep doing it.
We're going to give you the electronic equivalent of the battering ram.
Correct.
Right.
Right off of Facebook.
Right onto a nail. We're going to put you right onto a nail. And in advance, I'm just going to say I'm probably not going to get to my news and announcements.
Probably not.
Nope. But a lot of this stuff can wait until next week anyway. So, or the week after, because we're off next week.
So Elizabeth Deviney, who is
Here in person.
correct, she set up the thread that we're using as the basis to start this conversation. I want to give a shout out to Elizabeth Deviney.
Yes.
She's one of the
Thank you.
moderators or the mods on Ion Potstown. It seems to me that this post went up sometime around March. The date that I have on my email is March 4th at about 8 o'clock in the morning. So that's how long we've been going here. So I'm going to go into that. Now, there's a bunch of different stuff. Mick and I have talked three times already?
Yep. Yeah.
And
Most recently this week.
we kind of prioritize some of the things that we want to talk about. So right up off of the bat, one of the things that I want to do is get into some of the data that the chief put together. I think it would be wrong of us not to talk about the homework that you did since
Thank
you did your homework.
Yes. And
On
data.
my notes.
Hard numbers. Hard, real numbers.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's a general perception, and this is you. How long have you been in Potsdam?
With the police department over 23 years, and then if you count my years with the county, over 26 years.
Right. So I think you'll agree with me. Over the course of that time, one of the general perceptions of Pottstown is that the crime rate is high.
Right.
Like in the 8 years that I spent on the Potsdam Police Department, year after year after year, one of the complaints that I would hear from the citizens when I was out on the street answering calls was, why don't you guys do something about this super high crime rate that's
Right.
here in Pottstown? So let's get into that. Tell us what data you brought to either dispel or confirm the statement, crime is out of control in Pottstown.
It's not out of control in Potsdam, and we know that. And just from talking from years ago when we were young, how the town has transformed,
Sure.
especially High Street, but not only High Street, but the neighborhoods. There were neighborhoods when I started here that were known around the county as some of the worst areas in the county. And let's say Washington Street was known as the corridor. Washington and Walnut Street was considered one of the worst corners in Montgomery County. I mean, when police officers from other townships or boroughs would come here, they'd want to know where Washington Street was.
Right.
Because it was just
Yeah,
it was
and not
open air
in a
drug.
good way.
No, not at all. But I mean, it has changed, and it has absolutely changed for the better.
Right.
So I
And
do have
good-
some stats for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm not big on stats because when you start talking about numbers and worrying about numbers, you kind of lose focus on the people.
Right.
You know, you lose faces. You start worrying about what numbers say.
Right.
Well, and numbers really, you can kind of, they don't really show the whole picture.
Right.
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 Just
And-
one piece of the puzzle.
Right. And immediately when he starts talking about some of these numbers, you'll also see that there's ways for people to interpret
Sure.
the data. Even though this is numbers and they're hard numbers and numbers we should consider facts,
Yep.
different people are going to interpret this in different ways.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's get into it.
So, all right, in 2021, so last year, the Potsdam Police Department handled 26,913 calls for service.
Wow. 26,000 calls for
26,000,
service.
almost 27,000 calls for service.
Yeah.
That's the most we've ever answered.
Mhm.
That doesn't include traffic stops. That's 911 calls, officer initiated activities, but it's calls for service.
Or somebody who could, for instance, walk into the station and say, I need to
Right.
talk to a police
Yeah, for
officer.
walk-ins, yes.
Right.
So out of those 27,000 calls, only 3,071 calls were actually for crimes. So you're looking at only about 11% of our calls for service. 11% of the police activity in Pottstown is for crime.
So what's the other 89%? Like cats stuck in trees?
You
Yeah.
name it.
Yeah.
And we were just talking about it the other day. We get called, I mean, it could be a loud music call, cat dead in the street, a water hose on.
Right. So when I was a police officer, and this was in the summertime when trends definitely go up in the summertime
Sure.
in urban areas. There's more people out on the street.
Yep.
People don't have air conditioning. They start getting uncomfortable. Kids are out of school. There's just more activity.
Right.
So it's not uncommon to be very busy in, let's say, July and August. So it's about that time of year. And Patrolman Matt Green, badge number 145, Patrol Zone 1, which is the biggest patrol zone in Potstown,
Okay.
and touches all the other patrol zones. So every time there's a two-man call, I'm going to it.
Yep.
Plus handling all of Zone 1, which is almost the entire north end of Potstown.
Okay.
Okay. From Beach Street north, basically.
Pretty wide area. Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, I have tons of stuff to do. I have piles of paperwork that I have to get done. And we'll talk about paperwork burden
Yeah.
in this conversation. I got a call. I had my paperwork out. Crimes. Now this is paperwork for crimes that I'm investigating or information that I'm putting in initially so that the detectives can follow up and
Right.
potentially make an arrest or open up a criminal investigation. I have all of this work to do. I get dispatched to get in my patrol car to drive up to Chicken Hill to turn off a garden hose. Somebody was in their house drinking their coffee, looking out their kitchen window, and saw that their neighbor left their garden hose on. So they called the police to have us go up there and turn the garden hose off.
Right.
Now, a couple of things.
Don't call the police for that, folks.
Don't-
When I started working on 4th of July, we were shocked when Lieutenant Long told us that people call the police department to find out when the fireworks
Oh,
are.
yeah.
Do not call the police to find out when the fireworks are.
But that's a call
They're
for
at
service.
dark. It's at dark, folks.
Right.
That's when the fireworks are. Yeah.
If that call goes into the dispatcher who punches a card, it's called punching a dispatch card. Are you guys still punching cards?
We still do it.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
So that's
But
one of
we're all
those.
through the
So
county.
that's
Yeah.
one of those 26,000 calls.
Correct.
Was there was maybe 10 calls of
If an
what
officer-
time were the fireworks?
Not just a phone call, but if an officer had to go there and talk to somebody,
Right.
but not just a phone call,
Right.
wouldn't be considered a call.
But so but turning off the garden hose that day, I had to go and do that.
Right.
Now, theoretically, I shouldn't have been on those people's property to turn off the garden hose because
Right.
I'm the police. I have to, in order to enter
Right.
someone's
Sure,
property,
you
what
have
do
to.
I need?
Probable cause?
Correct. I need
Okay.
a search warrant, or the
Right.
place has to be on fire.
Right.
A running garden hose is not a crime,
No.
and it's not a danger to public safety.
No.
So I had to leave all of my work that was crimes to go turn off the garden hose.
So why couldn't the person just go on? They
If
didn't.
you're-
They didn't want to go on their neighbor's property.
or whatever.
Right.
All right. go ahead.
Probably one
Yeah.
of the most frustrating, and we talked about it, stressful things of our patrolmen is getting paperwork done.
Right.
Is getting
Right.
paperwork done. And as soon as you sit down and you just get set up, ready to do paperwork, maybe you got a cup of coffee, you get a call and you got to go.
Right.
And you
And
just
it,
leave everything there.
yeah.
And it slows down the process.
Sure.
The other thing it does is every time let's say I make an arrest, let's say it's one of those 3,000 times that it was a crime and I make an arrest. I could be off the street then from answering calls for as many as 3 or 4 hours.
Sure.
I have spent an entire 12-hour shift processing people that I arrested.
Right.
I remember one night in particular, the stars were aligned in the right way. I made 5 arrests during the course of a 12-hour shift,
Wow.
right? I was done. And not just that day. The next day I came
It
here.
carries over. You have to, yep.
So that's one less cop that's out on the street
Sure.
pulling cars over, whatever else.
Right.
But at that time, the priority for the people in Potstown was they wanted to see a crime response. So that's what we were trying to do.
Right.
But every time we made an arrest for that crime, whether it was me or Mick or any of the other guys that were on the street, we're done.
Right.
We're not out there.
So
And then
I don't want to go
that's
too
extra
far. I don't want to go too far afield because we have one stat and we're
Right.
already like 5 minutes, on this one stat. But how do people know where to call if they're not going to call the police? Like if there's a noise issue or there's, I'm sure you've gotten tons of fireworks, people shooting off fireworks illegally or not illegally or whatever. Those are legitimate
Yeah.
calls. They're just not crime-related calls. Who should the neighbor have called for the hose?
His neighbor.
The police are the only people to call.
Right.
And that's why we get so many calls.
Right.
And
There's
I think
really nobody else
Yeah.
you're going to call for. I mean, we're seeing that, especially through the pandemic, for mental health.
Mhm.
With all the services that were shut down. I mean, in 2020 was our busiest year.
Of course.
And you think during the pandemic, everybody was locked down, it wouldn't have been busy. But our mental health calls and our domestic calls.
And domestic calls, right.
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 And mental health calls aren't always crime related. You understand what I'm saying? Maybe it's just somebody that needs to get put in touch with the right resource.
Yep.
Right.
Right. So there is some of that too. I think some people, this is my opinion now, and one that has a little bit of experience behind it, is if citizens of Pottstown really want to step up to the plate and do something about crime and help the police, then develop some relationships with your neighbors so that when you do see your neighbor's hose running,
Yes.
hey, that's Myrtle's
Yes.
hose.
So,
Let me give her a buzz
right.
and see what I can do to help her out. Or spend a little bit of time. It doesn't have to be long. We talked about this during the stay-at-home orders. 5 minutes, 3 minutes out of a week. Do a little Googling about your town. Find out what resources are available
Right.
to you.
Right.
Maybe there's something that will help you. Maybe it's something that's going to help a neighbor or a family member who's struggling so that you don't have to make that call, at
Right.
least initially. Now, if it gets to the point that the person's mental health is a danger to themselves or other people,
Then obviously.
absolutely call
Right.
the police.
Right.
But if it's just plugging them into a service, it's better for the citizens to get involved in that
Right.
than to call the police. If I show up, I don't know that Uncle Charlie likes to yell when he gets nervous.
Right.
that might threaten me.
Right.
Now we're in a situation.
Right. Well, I've long said that the number one thing that people can do to help their town or to help their neighborhood is just to get to know their neighbors. Look
Yeah.
out for each other. If you know your neighbors and and then you can say, oh, something seems off here. Like there's somebody going into that house that doesn't belong there. Or, I haven't seen Mr. Jones in a long time. We should probably check on him. But the number one thing that you can do to improve your local neighborhood is just to get to know your neighbors. Right. All right. Give us some more stats.
So if you go back and you look at the FBI stats over a 10-year period, it shows that through all regions of the United States over the past year or the past 10 years, crime, especially violent crime, has been on the rise.
Right.
And it's not
So that's a
isolated.
national trend.
Yes, national trend.
Unfortunately.
So I went back and looked at our stats for the last 10 years, and I don't know if it's good or bad, but we have been consistent of anywhere between 10 to 11.5% of our calls are for crime. So we have not been increasing in crime.
Right.
In Potstown. I think we sometimes go through spurts
Sure.
of crime. Sometimes that depends on who's here from out of town and what they're doing. But historically, especially at least over the last 10 years, we do not fit the national average of an increase in crime.
So
Does that
there
make
you go.
sense?
It makes
Yeah.
perfect
Okay.
sense to me. And one of the things that I wanted to bring up along those lines is the reports that Mick is talking about. It's called the Uniform Crime Report, the UCR. It gets put together by the FBI, who's underneath the Department of Justice.
Mhm.
Any person can Google right now.
I'm going to Google it right now. What is it? Unified Crime?
Uniform Crime
Uniform?
Report. And it's underneath the FBI,
Yep.
and it's released by the Department of Justice.
There
you
it
can
is.
go to either one of their websites and look it up. If you dig around on those websites, you will actually come to a section where you can search the UCR for Pottstown.
Right.
Any community in America that reports to the UCR is reflected in those numbers.
We have pages. When guys do their reports, they have to code. You code every call
Right.
under a UCR code, under the Uniform Crime Report. And every call gets coded.
Yep.
And that's how it gets reported to the FBI.
Right. So it's a different, whatever category it's in.
different
Right. Got it.
categories, and it's
My
literally
favorite code,
Running hose? No, not the running hose.
3600.
What's that?
Police, what is it?
Disturbance.
Yeah, disturbance non-reportable.
non-criminal, yeah. Or
Non-
9100.
What's
It's
that?
not needed.
It's, yeah,
9100.
9100. That's the one. I got it. It's
Wait,
9100. 9100.
Which is
Police action not required. 9100.
Got it.
Police action not
Not
required.
required.
Because you don't have to do a detailed report.
it's all about the paperwork, right?
Now look. Here's the reason I'm talking about these UCR reports and where people can find them is that in some of the questions that we got, and Mick looked at all the questions and everything, and we talked about them yesterday. One of the kind of accusations that was levied against the Potsdam Police Department was that the police fudged the numbers. They're not reporting to the UCR, or they're showing up on scenes where they should be making an arrest or filing a detailed report, and they're 9100ing it. I can assure you, and the chief's going to back me up, but I'm going to talk to you from the patrolman level, right? There are so many layers of double checking your reports that it is nearly impossible to fudge the numbers.
Right.
It's
And why
nearly
would-
impossible.
Why would you want to fudge the
Well,
numbers?
why would you risk your career by
Right.
fudging numbers and sending them to the FBI? first of
Right,
all? But
right.
You
And-
wouldn't risk that. But
And if there's accurate data that you're reporting to the FBI, are there resources that are based on that?
Yes.
Like, so
Yeah.
you get money, like, right? So
Yeah, so-
if you were to fudge it to make make it look better, you would be getting less funding.
Right. So if you were going to fudge, you would fudge it the opposite,
opposite
way
way.
to look at like crime is out of control.
We need more money.
We need more
Right.
money. And that's
Yes.
exactly right.
So tell people some of the stuff that you use for that money. So these are grants. These are federal grants that come into the borough of Potsdam, and not just Potsdam, all communities across the United States of America. And Potsdam has a grant writer.
Yes. I got to say thank you to Courtney High. She helps out the police department a lot. with writing grants for us because I would have never been able to do it.
Right.
Yeah, it's a specific skill
It is.
to write a grant.
It definitely is.
So Mick, who's ultimately responsible for reporting to the UCR, right, takes those UCR numbers. The Department of Justice releases on a regular basis the type of grants that are available, and then gives that information to Courtney High, who uses the data and the grant application to make grants to get money to come into the borough of Potstown.
For various programs, right?
Correct. So
Right.
break them off. What are
So-
you spending that money on?
In the past year, we've outfitted all our patrol cars with new in-car cameras, with audio, video, and the camera has a GPS in it, so you can see all the metadata.
Right.
We also outfitted all the patrol cars with new GPS on it. So actually, Lieutenant Long, he tracks where everybody goes while they're on patrol. You could see live, or you could go back in the last 12-hour shift and see where everybody drove.
Right.
You can tell they're patrolling and doing their job.
I love that guy, by the way. Give him a raise. Yeah.
He's a good guy.
He is a good guy.
Heartbeat of the department.
Helps us out a lot. Yeah.
And then we also just recently got body cameras. Every police officer has a body camera.
I don't think I realized that you didn't have body cameras.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
they're not cheap. They're not
Sure.
cheap, and without federal grants, we wouldn't have been able to get any of that stuff. So the body cameras aren't outfitted yet. They're at the station. They're charging. Everybody has one. But we're waiting we need a certain part to link it to the in-car cameras. So when you get out, the body camera automatically links with the in-car. Just like,
Thank God we're not in charge of that technology, Matt.
So I had to wear a microphone, and I didn't like them, but for a lot of different reasons. But I wasn't necessarily a fan of them, but we had to wear them, especially when we were on traffic stops. And it does help people. It helps the police. It also helps the public from time to time. The body cameras and stuff, this is a whole layer of technology. It was just starting to emerge when I resigned from police work. So this is all new stuff, but each body camera could be worth thousands of dollars.
Right.
Each individual camera is $1,000 plus piece of equipment.
Right.
And we're getting
the
that.
storage.
Mick is getting that equipment for the borough of Potstown at no borough of Potstown tax expense.
Right.
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 In order to go out and do their job and document.
Right. I mean,
the
it's
things that are
ultimately our
happening.
money because we're all taxpayers.
Right.
But
But
at the federal level, but it's not coming out of the police budget for the borough of Potsdam.
Right. So,
Right. And then that also is, there's, it helps with accountability, right? If you've got those cameras and to see really what you guys are up against.
So there's a little bit of I'm gonna take this opportunity to kind of jump around a little bit because there is somebody that's talking about things that are happening at the middle school when the middle school kids get out, and I'll start historically. When I started in Potstown, the 5th grade hadn't been moved yet to the middle school.
Right.
Those guys were still at the elementary school. And when the 5th grade got put to the middle school, it increased the number of students that was at the middle school. And initially what was happening was the school district was letting those kids out all at the same time. And it was literally putting 1,000 kids out onto the street at one time.
Yeah.
And I remember, because I was on patrol then, we were up there on a regular basis. Since then, and not only I'm a cop in Potstown. I have 3 sons that went through Potstown School District. 1 son who's a junior currently. Things changed. The school district learned some lessons about that. They've now staggered dismissals
Right.
to put less kids out. There's a school resource officer. Who's the school resource officer now?
We don't have one anymore.
Oh, you don't have one anymore. You got rid of that.
The school did.
Okay. So the school decided that they don't want to have the school resource officer anymore.
Correct.
Okay. But at least initially, the school resource officer was up there working inside the schools.
It was Tone Fisher.
Tone.
Tone was
Okay.
the school resource officer.
Right. So he must have got into that job shortly after I left the police department. I left in 2015.
So, and what does the community resource officer do? What is their position?
The school
Are there-
resource officer, he was, when we had one, he was assigned to basically the high school and the middle school. And he handled any calls that were at the schools. He was there just to communicate.
Just
with
to
the
be there,
kids,
just
talk
as
to
a-
the
okay.
kids, yeah. Build a relationship with the kids, but if there was an issue with the school, he handled it.
Right. The police for the school district, basically. What I'm saying is there's already been things that have happened that have reduced the number of problems that you're getting at the middle school to reduce the number of nuisances. Is that fair to say?
You're gonna have to say that again for me, Matt.
Is there have you seen, since the school district changed staggered dismissals, had more staff outside of the school at dismissal? Have you seen a reduction in the amount of nuisance calls or criminal calls that you're getting during middle school dismissal?
When they came back from the pandemic,
Yeah,
it picked back up.
back
Oh,
up.
sure.
Right.
So it's still at school dismissal, everybody's up there. The school actually pays for 2 extra police officers during school dismissal from like 2 to 4 or 1 to 3, just
Right.
because of the massive kids coming out.
Right.
They still stagger,
Right.
just the kids getting out of school, but there's
Yeah.
still
Well,
issues at
you know,
school
there's
dismissal.
still a lot of issues, pandemic-related
Right.
issues. You
Right.
got, kids that were really for almost 2 years, really
Yep.
like in a pretty messed up situation, and now
Yeah.
that's going to trickle out for a
Yeah.
while.
And that's when it started. When it came back from the pandemic,
Right.
that's when there were some issues.
Right.
So here's what I do want to say. It is unfortunate that those things are happening. And if your door is getting kicked in or there's a fight, then you should call the police.
Yes,
And,
absolutely.
and what I clearly heard the chief just say is there's patrol cars specifically assigned to middle school dismissal,
Yep.
right?
Yep. And
So-
almost every other police officer is up there, and a lot of foot patrols at that time.
Right.
A lot of just walking down with the crowd, standing at different corners. So, yeah, there's police officers.
Now,
out there.
some of this stuff is starting to work itself out, and leads itself to the next point that I'm going to make. And this is away from the police department. So this is what my challenge to the people in that community, or the people who are feeling some way about what's happening in the middle school. Dave Charles, who's currently in the chat, runs the Strive Initiative. The Strive Initiative is a during and after school youth mentoring program.
Right.
That is a great way.
So Dave is stepping up right now. He's saying, I would like to know where you live. I will come and wait near your place. He did this 2 weeks ago and the issue was solved. So there you go. Dave, thank you for stepping up. Hopefully you'll get together with Ruth and hopefully you can talk privately and you can go by Ruth's house
Right.
and deal with those kids.
So this goes back to the point that, again, some people are going to get upset that they're going to hear it, but it's the truth. There are issues in this community that the community is going to have to step up and address.
Right.
The police can't fix these
Everything.
problems.
Right.
And listen, this is something I firmly believe in. And again, I was a cop in some way, shape, or form for 15 years. I've made hundreds, if not thousands, of arrests during the 15 years that I worked in law enforcement. None of the arrests that I ever made solved the problem.
No.
There's not a single arrest that I made that solved the problem.
Right. Yeah.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, these problems go way, way upstream.
Right.
So if there's kids that are carrying on and acting, it happens way upstream. It's their upbringing. It's their lack of supervision. It's a million different things.
So there's
and,
two-
and then it
right,
and then
and
it gets to the point where
where
they're
it's
kicking at people's doors.
in the neighborhood.
Right.
So here's what the neighborhood can do, in my opinion. This is from a civilian standpoint, right? Because that's what I am. This is my civilian opinion. Hook up with Dave Charles.
Yep.
If you have some spare time, volunteer to be a youth mentor. Sit with some of these kids. Give them some of the youth or some of the adult attention that they are craving.
Right.
That could solve
That they need,
problems.
yeah.
Right. The other part of it too is there's an after-school program at the middle school. It's called the
Pride? No,
Pride program.
Yeah.
Pride program. It's free. Free.
Used to be the 21st century
Correct.
program, right?
The kids get a snack. They get great activities that include field trips.
Yeah.
And lasts until about 5 or 5:30 when parents are getting home.
Right.
So if you have a middle school student, or you know a middle school student, or you're friends with a family that has middle school students, encourage that student or that family to sign the kid up for the
Right.
free
Yeah.
after school program. So there's 2 ways that I'm offering.
I'll tell you what else is free.
Go.
Create with a cop.
Yeah,
Create with
So
a cop.
let's
that
talk
we do
about
with
this.
with Art Fusion.
A program with Art
Right.
Fusion. It's going right now. I think it's every Thursday night. Officer Dice, Officer Fisher, a couple other detectives that are there every Thursday night with kids. And right now they're doing pottery
Right.
at Art Fusion. But go on their website. They're signing up kids for the next class.
So
Usually
what was
runs
the,
like
how
8
did that, talk about how that came about? Like, how was that born, that
That
program?
came from Erica at Art Fusion, and I can't remember her last name off the top of my head. She's not there
From
anymore.
years ago, Erica Hornberg Cooper, yeah.
Yeah. When I first became chief, she asked to meet with me to come up with programs to get the police and the kids to work together. And I love the idea. She came up with Create with a Cop, the idea, the name. And I said, well, that's what you want to do. We'll supply the cops. That's no
Right.
problem. And Potstown Health and Wellness has been funding it.
Great.
So again, this
it's
is
great.
another, besides just making arrests, which isn't going to solve a problem in my opinion, and having an increased presence in the community. The community has to call when they see problems and have the police address them. So above and beyond that, we've now offered 3 different ways that the community can get involved, or that an alternative way that the police are currently involved with the community in order to reduce crime.
Right.
There's a direct link in crime reduction to these youth mentoring programs. It's a direct correlation. So that's one of the things that the Potsdam police are currently doing
Right.
to address crime.
Yeah, Dave Charles is saying that's why we need mentors. Once students connect with a community adult, they usually don't want to let that adult down. We need consistent adults in the building daily. So thank you, David, for what you are doing. I hope that you hook up with Ruth, and please report back to us. Let us know how you made out and if you were able to solve the problem. We're eager to hear.
Yeah, I would be really
Mhm.
interested to hear the follow-up to that, and I'm sure the chief would too.
Yeah.
Right.
So that covers one of the comments that came up on Eye on Potsdam, which is asking for increase in community engagement. You've already talked about the fact that you're increasing foot patrols up there around the middle school during peak hours.
Yep.
You want to talk, because that was another one of
I
the
think
questions.
that was
Yeah.
another one of the comments was
So
why
let's-
can't we get more foot patrol?
Right. Foot patrols, that's the way some guys make their career. That's how you get to know people. That's how you know who lives on what block. And when you're really doing a good job and you can walk down the street, people start calling your name out and you know you did something right.
Right.
Problem with foot patrols is it takes the police officer out of the car. And if you park your car right here at High in Charlotte and you walk down to High in Washington and something serious comes in, you're 3 blocks
Yeah.
away from your car.
Right. Right.
Foot patrols are great. I wish we could say every shift there's going to be 2 guys on foot patrol, 2 guys on bike, and 4 guys in their zone. Because we break Potsdam into 4 zones for patrol. We just don't have the manpower for that. So every police officer during his shift, we ask him to do at least 1 foot patrol.
Him or
and
her.
they try. And then we have other guys that are assigned to do foot patrols.
Right.
But it's a great tool to
Mm-hmm.
get out of your car. You got to get out of your car. You got to get to know people. They have to see you as a human being. They
Sure.
can't see you as that person driving in the police car with the badge. And policing has changed, and they have to know you're a person. They have to know your name. They have to be able to call you and talk to you. The problem
And
is,
know that they can trust you.
right,
Right.
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 So the problem is, I guess, is from the administrative standpoint, it's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
Even when you're a corporal or a sergeant running a squad, let's get into this a little bit.
Yeah.
On a daily basis, we have four zones in Potsdam, right?
Yep.
There's 1 car assigned to each zone.
Yep.
Typically, there's 1 cop in each car, so that's 4.
Yep.
And then you have a supervisor, a
Right.
shift supervisor.
Right.
So that's 5 cops,
Yep.
right, on the street patrolling.
Yeah.
So let's say, for instance, that you take one of those guys out of the car and you put them on foot patrol.
Yep.
And just like Mick explained, something breaks off. Well, now you only have 3 guys to go respond to that thing.
Right.
Now, let's say you have a domestic dispute came in.
Right.
And you did say that there's been an increase in domestic disputes
Yes.
since the pandemic.
Yep.
And if people can't wrap their head around that one.
Right.
Right.
And that's
Right.
all. And that's also a national trend. That's not just in Potsdam.
Right.
That is
Because
national.
people
Correct.
are tired of each other.
Tired
now.
of each other, right?
So anyway, so let's say a domestic call comes in. Domestic call,
2 guys.
automatic.
Automatically 2 guys. One of the most dangerous calls you can go to is a domestic.
So now you have a cop on foot patrol. You have 2 cars at a domestic. That leaves 1 more cop
Right.
and the supervisor
Right.
to cover the rest of Potstown.
Yep.
Then the call for the turning off the garden hose comes in, right?
Right.
Now you have a
The-
supervisor.
now you have a supervisor who, if he's a good supervisor,
Or
and
she.
there's no female supervisors,
just saying it
unfortunately,
could
in
be.
Potsdam Police
We're just trying to
Department.
be egalitarian
Right.
here.
I'm using the
Stop
he
rolling your eyes in the
the-
broad sense.
of mankind.
Right.
She
Person
kind.
kind. Person
What a- oh
kind.
my
All
God.
right. All right.
This
I'm
is
just
a whole nother
I'm
show.
just giving you a hard time.
My point is, if it's a good supervisor, he's now got to realize where his men are deployed across the board, and most likely he's going to start heading towards that domestic dispute because that's the hottest call.
Right. The most dangerous one.
Right. So now you have no cops
Right.
on the street. The answer to that is more cops, right? And from time to time, let's go back to our UCR.
Yep.
I got hired on a grant. I got hired in Potsdam Police Department from a federal grant.
I think
Right.
there were 49 police officers when you got that brought us up to 49.
49, right. I got hired with Heather Long, Chris Zahorchak, and Mike Breslin. I was one of 4 that got hired from that Safe Streets grant or whatever it
Right.
was at that
Yep.
time. So that's one way to increase the availability to do these specialty patrols, right?
Right.
Traffic, foot, everything else.
Right. Somebody's mentioning bike
Bike
patrols.
patrol.
We do have bike
We
patrols.
do have bike patrols. Yep. On nice days, if there's more than 4 zones, some days you could end up with 5 or 6, depending on if anybody took the day off or called in sick or was injured. Court.
Injuries,
Yeah.
vacations,
Balancing
training.
manpower. Yeah, trainings. You got to send guys to trainings. More important now than ever.
Sure.
Training and policy. You
So-
got to be up on it.
What we're doing here is trying to give people the idea, or at least the picture, that it's not the chief that doesn't want to do these foot patrols. It's not even the cops. Listen. I
Well,
love.
it's just,
Yeah.
I never knew this or thought about it that way, that if you have somebody that's on foot patrol, it takes away from, or it makes it more difficult to respond to incidents that happen that officer has to get to. So the more you know,
right.
then you say, oh, okay, that makes sense. Now, obviously, you're going to have foot patrol if there's a car show or there's some sort of big activity, or it's a Friday, Saturday night in the summertime. The beer gardens are all open. There's a lot of activity. It makes sense to have a foot patrol
Yes.
then, because there may be an incident. But it's just not practical without increasing the number of officers you have on during any given shift.
Yeah.
So it's a safety issue or a response issue, and be able to have those officers be able to respond. But it's also a money issue.
Yeah.
Sure.
So that becomes one of the next points. So we're having a conversation here. We're covering a lot of different questions by just talking about this foot patrol
Right.
issue, right? So you were telling me when we were talking on the phone that it was your idea. When during budget time, you wanted to hire 2 new cops, right?
I did bring it to Borough Council, yes, at a
Right.
presentation last year, due to the complaints in traffic and the complaints of speeding around town. I did preliminarily, early in the budget, ask for 2 extra police officers. And then once they got on board, we would assign 2 people to only do traffic enforcement. That's what they would be assigned to do, traffic enforcement. Once the finance committee started looking at it, We realized it's going to make people's taxes go up. I didn't want to be the reason people's taxes were going
Right.
up.
So that's a balance.
So, yeah.
Right. There are.
I think-
There's no challenges, only expenses.
Right.
Right. So everything is an expense.
Right.
I think-
It's a balancing act.
Right.
Manpower, allocation of manpower to handle everything that needs to be handled. Those 27,000 calls for service, to handle the traffic complaints, to handle the crime, to handle nuisance complaints. It's a balancing act, and you have to do it every day. We should say, really, the sergeants have to do it every day
Right.
to determine who's going to do what. We did help out probably 6 months after I became chief. We created special operations.
Okay.
And special operations right now is Sergeant Hatfield, Officer Dice, and Officer Fisher. Their primary function is foot patrols.
Okay.
Okay, so they're assigned to foot patrols, but they're also assigned to do prison runs. Because
Okay.
you know,
Well,
if you send a
that's
guy
a
down
whole
to the
other
prison,
thing I
you could
totally
be-
forgot
To do
about.
what?
Prison runs. So,
Oh, you got to take people
Yeah.
that get
Yeah.
arrested. You got to. Yeah.
and for court,
Yeah. So that's
court
and
dates
court,
come up, you
sure.
gotta go
So
and
that
pick 'em
takes
up.
you out of the rotation.
prison runs.
Right.
that was a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
Because again, it took a car. It took a car and one cop off of the street for the time that those prison runs were going. I remember driving out to Camp Hill
Yeah.
and up to Bloomsburg and
Yeah.
stuff all over the place to go pick up these prisoners. Well, if I'm doing that in the middle of day shift on day shift, again, that's one less cop that's on the street to answer
Right.
calls
And you're
or write
done.
traffic tickets.
You could be done for a whole shift
Oh,
because you
yeah.
could go to the prison and you could get behind the sheriff's bus, or there could be a line and they could just be saying, "We ain't opening the doors
Hold on,
yet."
dude.
Right?
Right.
I
And
got
you sit there for
Yeah.
hours.
And then you're done.
You
Yeah.
done. I got stuck. I got locked down in Camp Hill because there was a prisoner miscount. So they wouldn't let anybody out of that prison until the
scary
count
is that?
got right. I got stuck in a sally port with a lifer road gang. There was 5 guys from this lifer. They were all lifers,
Yeah.
and they were part of the outside road crew.
Yeah.
And that's who I got stuck in the sally port with. There was a couple of tense moments.
Yeah.
But once they figured
They
out
don't
that
like you.
no, they don't like me, right? They're trying to figure out if I arrested any of their friends.
Right.
Like, seriously.
Right.
They're like, hey, who do we know from Potsdam? And I'm like, oh, here we go.
Right.
But once they figured
So-
out that I wasn't intimidated,
Right.
it was
You just
funny.
gotta
But
talk.
that's another example. But here's to my point, and here's
Okay.
where I'm going with this, is that Mick wants to answer the community's requests here for more traffic. We got more questions about traffic enforcement than anything else in this little experiment that we're doing.
And that's another thing that's gotten worse through the pandemic is reckless driving, and that's a national trend. I've read about that. It's not just Pottstown; it happens everywhere.
Right.
Is that there's just a lot of carelessness and recklessness going on as a fallout from the pandemic and people's
Because they had
mental
a
health
domestic with their wife, and now they're driving to the bar
Well,
and they're
just-
mad.
just in
Let's get real.
in general, that people are feeling
Stressed out.
they're feeling stressed out, but they're also feeling controlled, right? And so that's one way to release that is through reckless driving. And so it is a national trend. It is not just here in Potsdam.
Right. So
Right.
here's what I'm going to say. And again, this is another challenge that I'm throwing out to the people who want to hear about how traffic's being enforced. Mick's telling you point blank, I'll hire 2 more cops and put them out on traffic patrol every day. But
It's
your
going to cost
taxes
us,
might go
but it's
up.
going to cost us.
So
And that's
here's
going to be up to,
that's going to be up to the citizens, right?
yeah.
That's going to be up to the citizens. So I would
And
the
many more people hired than me, but
right.
that was
But
a
you know what I'm
suggestion.
saying?
Yeah,
It's your suggestion.
Yeah.
You're willing to do it.
Yep.
If the borough council came to you tomorrow and said, "Hey, we're giving you 2 more cops,"
Yeah.
you'd be happy as a clam.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Right.
You already know what you're going to do with those 2 guys.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You're right.
But the citizens of Pottstown are the ones that are going to have to show up at borough council meetings. They're going to have to call and email their elected officials, and they're going to have to say, I want more traffic enforcement, and if it costs me a little bit more money, I'm willing to do it. Or maybe we'll have to cut back in some other area. Maybe there's some other service or something that you're getting from the borough that maybe you want to trade that. I'll
Yeah.
trade this for more traffic enforcement. The chief has no control over that.
Right.
Guess who does? The people
We
that
do.
live in the
Right.
borough of Potstown.
Right.
What were you telling me about meetings? How many borough council meetings are you at? How many borough council meetings is a representative of the Potsdam Police Department at?
Every meeting.
Every one. So,
Every meeting. Sometimes more than one officer.
Right.
I'm always there, but
You're
there's usually
there,
somebody else.
and if you can't make it, a lieutenant's there.
Yep.
If a lieutenant can't make it, a sergeant is
Yep.
there, right?
Yes, every meeting.
I was a patrolman, and I went to them. I got
It's good to
taken.
go
I got
there.
taken to a couple
Yeah.
of them. Right.
You learn by going to them. You
Well,
absolutely learn.
Guess what these citizens can do? They could talk to you, couldn't they?
Yep,
Yes.
before and after the meeting. I'm up there by 6:30 every night. You can
Right.
come up and talk to me.
Talk to them.
Yep.
Right. And
I'm being
have-
a little.
can you-
I'm being a little
No,
smart,
but you're right.
but it's true. And what were you saying about the number of people that are usually at these borough council meetings that you're at, willing to talk?
Well,
You still carry your notepad, right?
yeah. Oh, yeah. I always have it with me. And since the pandemic's been over, and it's understandable, not that many people want to get out, but really, borough council meetings have just been, for the most part, there's been a couple that got a little crowded, just been employees
right.
that are sitting in the crowd.
Right.
So it would be nice for,
Do you want to put up the chief's email address?
Yeah, I'm going to put that up so that people can get in touch with him. And again, this is another way to let your voice be heard. And it's, listen, to finish my point, and I'm trying to help you out as best I can. Mick wouldn't be here if he didn't want to talk to the community.
absolutely. I'll tell you, some people know, my door is always open. As long as I'm not in a meeting or taking care of something that's more serious, if you come in and you want to talk, you're always welcome to come into my
That's-
office. And whether it's to talk, express a concern about something, or email me or call me.
And
Well,
Tammy
that's very
Vaughn-
generous
Tammy
because a lot of
Vaughn-
chiefs would probably be like, you need to make an appointment or you
Well,
need to.
We're servants of the society that we work for. We are servants of the community.
Tammy Vaughn is saying she's emailed Mick several times. He has always helped.
Yes.
So again, this kind of goes back to my point that a lot of these complaints and questions that we got, the police can only do so much.
Right. So for example, this somebody asking for a stop sign at a specific place. Do you guys control where stop signs go? Does it depend on the street? Does it depend, like how much control do you have over traffic patterns and traffic
Yeah.
signs?
We'll do a study on it. We've actually done, just presented it to Borough Council, I think in last month it was approved, based on citizens' complaints, concerns of council people, and concerns of police officers. We did several studies at different intersections and to add stop signs.
Great.
I don't remember them off the top of my
Okay.
head. I know Evans and Jefferson is one of them.
Right.
Multiple complaints. and
Okay.
accidents there.
So for example, the gentleman that's asking for Franklin and May Street, right? Franklin and May. So email the chief.
Yeah,
Say, hey, can you give, this is a concern, this is an area of concern, we've noticed a lot of X, Y, Z, can you please look at it? And then you can put it on your next traffic study.
yep, and we'll look at it.
Right, all right, so there you go.
So then the traffic study has to go up the line, right? Like if it's a state-controlled street,
Oh, right, so like
Right.
Charlotte Street and High Street, those
Yeah.
are state controlled, so you only have so much input as to,
Yeah, it would absolutely be up to the state. for
right,
that.
right.
so there's
PennDOT
a
would do that.
there's a process for this on states that aren't solely controlled by the borough of Potstown. So I think people should know that too. Now, it can't hurt for Mick or whoever's doing these traffic studies to forward that information to PennDOT. And again, it's going to require, if you're that dedicated to it, if you call up Mick and Mick tells you, hey, that's a state, we're going to do a study, but that's a state street. At the end of the day, they have a call that they're going to have to make.
Then your next question should be, okay,
Who's
who
my
should I
state
talk to?
representative? Right.
Who
We
should
work
I talk
close
to
with-
about that? Right,
We work close with PennDOT. We could forward that information. Lieutenant Long or Sergeant Hatfield would call their contacts in PennDOT.
Right.
should I
but then
call,
again, on
should
the
I call the
citizen
police
side-
if there's a giant pothole? No.
No, call the
Who's-
streets department.
Call the street
Unless-
sergeant, Department of Public
Well,
Works, is that who it
yeah.
is? Yeah,
Unless you think it needs a barricade, we can get a barricade out there for you.
right, okay.
I should say, don't ever hesitate to call the
Right.
police,
Well,
regardless of what it is.
so we had this big accident right in front of our building a couple of weeks ago. And the push here for the walk sign, that little pedestal came down and there was like loose wires hanging all over the place, I did not call the police. I called Public Works and said, there's a street, traffic, whatever it's called, knockdown. And they came right out and
Yeah, they're
took
very
care of
good.
it for us.
They get out there right away.
But yeah, so you got to know who to call.
Again,
Well, while we're on speed, can I say
yeah,
something about you want to call people, call your state rep, because Pennsylvania is the only state in the nation that does not allow municipal police officers to use radar. But yet we're one of the worst with
So say that again.
fatalities.
It's the only state in the nation that does not allow municipal
Police
police
officers
forces
to
to
use
use
radar.
radar.
Yes, for speed enforcement.
Right, only state troopers can use
Only
radar.
Pennsylvania State Police.
Right. So you can't sit out on industrial with a gun, with a radar gun.
No.
no.
And
Right.
some
So that would
streets in
take
Pottstown are, I don't want to say impossible, but would be very difficult to run speed enforcement just because of the way the cars are parked, because we have to do timing, over distance and speeding.
Right.
The distance the car travels over a certain amount of time to get its speed. So you can't very well hide a police car, plus watch a car and time it in a lot of areas of Potsdam.
It's tough.
Right, okay, so that's a
that
great,
vote is coming up very soon.
that's a great answer to a question of why can't the police do more about speeding? So your hands are tied to a certain degree because the state of Pennsylvania does not allow radar at the municipal level. And so that's something that we should contact our state rep and say, we would like our police force to be able to use radar. What's the, has this come up for vote before and been
Yes.
and shot down?
Yeah.
Why? What's the argument against it?
I'm not sure exact reason. I've heard that they're afraid that municipal police departments will use it to generate money. Because you get a certain portion of the ticket.
Okay,
You get half of the fine itself. I don't see that happening. You actually don't generate that much money off of speeding tickets anyhow.
well, according to everybody in Potsdam, there's so much speeding, maybe it would generate a lot.
Yeah.
So there's two more kind of hot topics or big topics that came out, and we're kind of working our way into this next one is this interagency cooperation. Now, in the thread on Ion Pottstown, the interagency cooperation started when people were talking about possibly having the need for a National Guard deployment on the streets in Pottstown at dark. Do you feel that it's necessary to call in the National Guard to patrol the streets in Pottstown after dark?
No,
What?
absolutely not. I wasn't sure if that was serious or a
Wait,
joke,
what?
but we
I
The
know
think they
National, like the National Guard?
Yeah, the National Guard.
That's for like
well, the National-
emergencies, like.
they're here to help.
Right. So this
with
goes
That's like when there's a
A flood?
hurricane and there's like,
fires,
right, or
riots.
riots.
Natural disasters.
The National-
when
the
communities
National
need to
Guard-
rebuild from things.
Yeah.
The National
All
Guard
right.
is there to help you.
Relax,
Um,
people. It's
I
not
don't
that
think we're
bad.
there.
Potsdam.
So you don't think crime's that bad? You don't feel like you got to pick up the phone
And call the National
and call the
Guard.
National Guard.
No.
You're not
We don't have
feeling
to-
Nobody
that.
would have
we
to
don't
do
need
that,
tanks
but-
rolling through.
No. I don't, and me and Matt talked about it. I'm not going to get into deep
I'm just
here, but-
no. I'm doing it, and
Right.
I'm being facetious. I'm
Right.
trying to lighten the mood and lighten you up a little
Yeah.
bit. But it does.
Give my
There
time.
have been times, and there are regularly occurring times when the Potsdam Police does work with a lot of three-letter agencies:
on a weekly basis.
PSP,
Yep.
FBI, DEA.
U.S. Marshals, Attorney General's office. How about, most importantly, the District Attorney's office?
Mhm.
Kevin Steele has Assistant District Attorneys on a unit in Potsdam.
Potsdam has its own district attorney outpost or whatever
Yeah.
you call it,
The
where
Community
there's a,
Justice Unit.
right, yeah,
And
so
3 of
there's
them are
somebody
stationed
from
in
the DA's
Potsdam.
office that's here specifically assigned to Potsdam to work with the police.
Yeah.
Right,
So
County detectives, they have their narcotics enforcement team, violent crime unit. They are constantly working with our detectives.
And
You
I-
just don't see them. You see Pottstown police because you're not going to see somebody from the FBI. You're not even going to know who he is.
that they're there.
right.
And we have officers on the FBI task force. We have officers on the DEA task force. We have detectives on Homeland Security task force. So we have access to their technology. We have access to their manpower. Anything we need, having them on their task force is just a phone call away.
And I think the one thing too that people should understand about the police officer that you have assigned to the DEA task force, right?
Yep.
That in particular, you get some revenue from that, correct?
Yes.
There's some money that comes back into the borough because of your participation in that.
That officer is assigned full-time to the DEA task force. He comes back to Potstown at least weekly. I mean, he checks in regularly. If we need help with a search warrant or we need help doing something, he's back in town. But for the most part, he's assigned to the DEA. And we reap the benefits of proceeds from seized drug money. And that helps buy equipment, which helps reduce the footprint on Potsdam tax.
Sure.
And here's
These
another
were
thing.
bought with that money.
Right. So we're going to get into those in a second. But again, this is another thing that people should think about because we're now telling them the whole story. That DEA officer, he's working. So the interagency cooperation,
Yep.
which is something the people of Potsdam want, they're getting it currently.
Absolutely, yeah.
They're getting help with the burden of paying for the police through that officer at working with the DEA.
Yep.
But here's what they're not getting. It's one more cop that's not on the street writing traffic tickets,
Correct.
right?
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
But
So there's a
payoff.
there's a
That
payoff
Yep.
for all of these decisions that get made. That's what I want to make clear to people. The other thing too, and people should really understand this, it's born, some of these concerns are born out of ignorance. And I'm not saying ignorant. I'm
Right.
saying ignorance.
You're right. Just
People,
not knowing. They
just
don't know.
I would not want the National Guard patrolling my streets of my town.
That would look pretty bad.
People talk about tyranny.
Yeah.
And we hear a lot about tyranny since the pandemic. If the National Guard was patrolling streets looking for criminals, that would really be tyranny because there are laws.
That would be pretty bad for property values, I think.
There are laws.
People definitely wouldn't want
Yeah.
to move to Potstown.
There are laws on the
Right.
books that prevent the military from working in law enforcement roles.
Right.
If that were to start happening, that's the literal definition of tyranny.
Right.
I don't want that. Do you want
No,
that?
Absolutely not. I'm about people's rights. As a matter of fact, that's what our job is, to protect people's
the rights.
constitutional
Right.
rights.
Right.
All right. You are getting some love, though, Chief. I'm going to share this. Anna Louise Fisher says, you are doing an outstanding job. Potsdam has improved dramatically over the last 17 years. We're glad you're at the helm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anna Louise.
Thank you.
So the interagency cooperation, we've just covered that.
Can we
a
talk
little bit.
about drugs?
What
Is
kind?
that one of the topics?
What kind of drugs?
Well,
What do you have, Amy?
because we were talking about the DEA, and I think as a citizen, I think that Pottstown is perfectly safe as long as you are not involved in some sort of illicit activity or doing things that you shouldn't be doing. I am a middle-aged white woman who often walks around Pottstown. I walk around Pottstown a lot at night. I will walk home from the pub here, up Penn Street to my house on Hanover Street. I will walk home in the dark wearing my fur coat by myself, and I have never had an issue. I never feel unsafe, ever. So I don't think that there's a threat to the average person. You're not going to get mugged. You might get panhandled. There might be a, hey, can you give me $5
Right.
for the bus kind of bullshit. But that might be the worst that happens. But it appears to me that most of the violent crime is over drugs and people that are not from Potsdam, or they're coming into Potsdam and doing illegal activity and shoot, like that horrible down in the 300 block or 400 block with the semi-automatic, that one that was caught on videotape. That was a little,
69 News showed on
yeah, that was a little terrifying. But though that was a drug-related activity.
I can't talk about it.
Okay.
But that's needs to go to trial.
It
But
appears
yes,
that was a drug-related activity, and it appears that there were people from out of town coming to Pottstown to
they absolutely were
doing
from out of town.
whatever they're doing, right? So I'm just telling you what I know from the newspaper and from the clip that I saw. But that's not Pottstown on Pottstown crime,
No,
if you will.
no, it's not.
Right?
So let's talk about one of the things that Mick can talk about. And those cameras that caught that
Mhm.
activity
Mhm.
are part of another way that the citizens can help the police.
Yeah.
And not only that, there was some concern in the thread on Potstown that the Potstown police aren't using surveillance technology in the borough of Potstown. So let's address that, because I think that'll naturally work its way into what you want to talk about with these rings.
We have, and again, I don't want to say too much, but everybody knows we have cameras in town. Some of them are blatant. You can see where they're at on different intersections. And some of them are more covert cameras. Cameras that we bought with seized drug money from the DEA that we probably never would have been able to afford. But you'll never know those cameras are there. We also have around town license plate readers that read license plates. They can tell us, is the license plate stolen? Is it expired? Is the car stolen? Is the inspection expired? Is the person that the car is registered to wanted? Or you could just punch it in and say, I'm looking to see where Mick Markovich drove today, and you can punch it in and it'll hit on those license plate readers. But technology for the average citizen today is relatively cheap, and you actually get a lot for your money. These ring cameras are amazing. They pick up, if you put one in front of your house, it will pick up basically everything that happens in front of your house, plus audio. But citizens are allowed to use audio. We can't use it.
Right,
So
you
if
need
you're
a
recording this
search warrant.
and you give
Really?
it to us, we can.
Okay, so we're allowed to use audio. I did not realize that. For some reason, I thought that was not.
Pennsylvania requires consent of the other party to record audio.
Right.
So that's why on some recorded
Sure, it
lines
says, I'm
beeps.
calling you on a recorded line.
Correct.
You know, this is whatever you call customer service, and it's recorded.
The police cannot listen for criminal activity without a search warrant, without a wiretap.
Right.
And there's specific laws
Mhm.
in place
Right.
to allow the police to do that. You have to produce a lot of evidence to the courts in order to get a wiretap search warrant.
Right.
To
So,
listen
but
to
if I have a recording and it's got audio on it, can I use that? Like if I were to I don't know, whatever kind of case I'm going to have that
If you're recording someplace like outside, like these record
in public.
Right.
Yeah, in public where
Yeah.
somebody doesn't have an expectation of privacy of
Got
being
it.
heard.
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine. That's
Okay.
why these
You can
are
give
amazing.
that. So let's break this down. If I have a ring and I'm using that on my front porch and I'm viewing this public street where anybody can walk around, just like Mick said, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy when you're
Got it.
walking down the street.
Got it.
If I record your voice talking about how you're going to go to 73 East West 5th Street to buy drugs, I can then give that information to the police because I legally, me as a citizen, legally collected that
Got it.
voice talking about a crime.
Got it.
I can give it to the police who then can legally do that. But
Got
the
it.
police can't go around putting microphones
Right.
out,
Right.
try to record people.
Got it. Unless they
saying bad
had
things.
the approval for a wiretap or something.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
And
Thank you.
people would not want that happening. Again,
No.
if that started happening, you want to talk, you think wearing a mask is
I was going to
tyranny?
say, if you want that, go move to Russia.
Yeah.
That's what happens over there.
You think if you really want to see some tyranny, give the cops some microphones and have them start recording people all over
Right.
the place. That's tyranny.
The only thing they're
Anyway.
going to record is not their new body cams. That's all they're going to record. Right. So tell us about these.
So we thought it was a good idea and we're going to start community meetings again. I know people have asked about the community meetings, and not to blame the pandemic, but the pandemic has basically put everything back 2 years.
Sure.
So we figured that if we could buy 3 to 5 ring cameras and start giving them out to people, as long as you give us your camera, as long as you give us your name, address, and phone number, so we know there's a camera there, and if there's a crime or an incident that happens there, you just give us the video of it. They're an amazing little camera. They're motion activated. And it gives you a sense of security at your house of who's at the front door. You can
Right.
watch it on your phone. I mean, they really are an amazing little thing.
These are good. I
have
helped-
one.
Amy has one,
I was able to see that Joe Cerisi came knocking on my door the other day,
right?
but I wasn't home.
I installed one for the folks over at the cluster. I'm on the board at the cluster, and they wanted one, so I put one up on their front door, and they allowed access to the people that need to see it. They can look at it on their phone, just like you're saying. It's super convenient. But here's what the chief is doing. Because really this was his way back to engage with the community since the pandemic, we're kind of kicking this off here on Porchcast Pottstown, and we thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that, really. The chief has given us 3 of these rings to Amy and I, to Porchcast Pottstown, to the Porchtonians.
Yes.
And through our conversations, what we decided to do was that we're going to work with Tamara Charles from Potsdam Community Action to get these 3 rings out into the community. So Tamara every day works with the community to identify people that want to help in the community, get involved in the community. And again, this is another way that we're giving people, the average citizen, a way to get involved in the community and help with crime reduction, right?
And
So
we need people's help.
Yeah.
There has to be a communication there. There has to be a partnership between the police, the community leaders to have an impact on crime.
Right, you're on our side.
Oh, absolutely.
You're on our side.
100%.
We got to be a team.
Yep.
So what we're going to do, we're going to hang on to these for 2 weeks, and in 2 weeks, Tamara and Jamie are going to come on the show from Potsdam Community Action (PCA). We've talked to them before, and they're going to come back in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have them help us identify the best place for these 3 cameras, and we'll give them away.
And then
Very nice.
So just so people know, and I just want to reiterate what the chief said, in order to get one of these, you have to be able to agree, or you have to want to agree to give the police your name and address.
Right,
So
they
that
want to know where they're going.
where they're at.
Right.
So that way, if something breaks off, for instance, at the corner of Evans and Beach Street,
Right.
and you know that one of these people has a ring camera in the area, you can give them a call
Right.
discreetly.
Right.
Discreetly.
Can you
Right.
send us the video from this time period?
Right.
And we try to, detectives do a really good job of trying to keep track of where cameras are around town. And I think Lieutenant Morrissey was plotting them this week. I think we have over 300 in the Borough of Potstown.
You have 300 registered rings.
Yes, not the police department,
Yeah,
but citizens have them.
Right.
Okay.
And,
Who have
Yeah.
registered them with? I mean, they let you know that they have them.
yes, they let us know that they have them and we know they're there.
I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's any requirement for registration here,
Yeah.
folks.
No,
Don't say
absolutely
that.
not.
No,
That'll be the next thing. Matt Green said.
Tammy
And
is
we
saying
can't give
that.
everyone.
Tammy is saying that they've turned their camera footage over to the police several times.
Yep.
Yep. And you know who needs to turn his footage over?
Who?
Jim Kane, who's getting his newspaper stolen every other day.
So yeah, all right. So let's not. That's an ongoing investigation, and I'd rather not reveal any more details about that.
Okay.
I'm kind of being serious.
I'm just making a joke. I was making a joke.
Yeah. Well, you're just touching a little close to home.
Sorry.
Yeah. Like literally
All
right next door. We'll talk
You
after-
said it,
we'll
not
talk after
me.
the show.
You said it, not me.
I know. Hey, jokes, folks. We're trying to lighten the mood.
Well, I know that I have learned an awful lot about how the police department works in Pottstown and why we can't just magically have certain things that we feel that we need,
Right.
but that there's a path towards getting those things. There's a path towards getting a stop sign if you want a stop sign, or there's a path to getting more foot patrol, and that is money.
Right.
Yeah.
And again, I just want to say it again, because I know some people watch the show and they jump off and come back on. Mick has given us a whole list of stuff that the Potsdam police are currently doing. They're covering a lot of bases without a lot of manpower. I mean, honestly.
So,
And the citizens need to get involved, even if it's just as simple as writing your council person an email. You don't even have to show up to the meeting.
right.
Or write Mick Markovich an email Let them know what's going on. Let them know what your desires are as a citizen, because it's only the borough council that's going to decide how this tax money is spent. So let them know how you want your tax
And
money
they need to
spent.
know what's important to their constituents.
Correct.
Right. How many police officers are on the Potsdam Police Force?
Maximum right now is 46.
46.
We have never, I became chief of August of 2018. We have never been fully staffed.
Okay.
Even though we're fully staffed on the books, Borough Council has done a great job hiring when we need them. But when you hire a new police officer, he has to go 6 months to the police academy.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes out, he does 4 months of training, field training here with the police department. So it's almost a year. So by that time, turnover just keeps going and going.
Right.
Officers get injured.
Sure.
Officers
Retire.
leave.
Right.
Yep.
What's considered full staffing?
Full staffing will be 46.
46. Okay. And how is that comparatively to, we're a borough of 5.5 square miles and 23,000 people?
Yeah.
So do we have just the right number of officers? Do we have more officers than a comparable city or borough?
I'd have to
Don't
admit,
know.
I didn't do
Okay.
any research on that. But
Okay.
I would say we would be below what we probably should have.
Right.
If a study was actually done. But we're probably right around there. I
Okay.
think when we were at 49 years ago under Mark Flanders, I think that was,
But that didn't even last very long, Mick.
no, it was only I think a 3-year period.
Yeah,
It
and
was for a
even
grant.
yeah, because I got hired then at that time,
Yeah.
like I said before, and I do remember there was nights, for instance, we could have a 2-man car.
Yeah.
I remember riding in a 2-man car,
Yep.
and then, for instance, like that night of that drug raid that we went over, it was the 2-man car that got sent to help you guys do
Yep.
the warrant, but that didn't last.
No, only a couple years.
Yeah. 2, 3. I remember 3 years.
Yeah, I think it was a
your
grant.
number is accurate. It was 3 years, and it was during the time that Flanders was chief. And then after that 3 years, we never were back up on that level again.
Through attrition, we went back down to 45,
And,
46.
and then there was a budget crunch.
Yeah.
And I'm you don't have to talk about it. I'm talking about it. I was there. We had a chief that didn't want to rock the boat with raising taxes and everything else, and he was aiming for another position within the borough, so he wanted to make his
Right.
resume look good.
Right.
And we didn't get some of the funding that we probably should have got, and there was less guys, and then a whole bunch of people got hurt. We got people sick.
Yeah, it's
There was retirements.
Yeah.
The 2 years before I left the Potsdam Police Department, this is in 2014 and 2015, we were 15 people short on the street. 15
think about how that
people
impacts.
short.
I mean, that's crazy.
It
How
was
that impacts.
insane.
Yeah.
It was insane.
The whole unit got this, crew basically got dissolved.
Dissolved.
I think I was the only one. Maybe me and Mike Long were the only ones left.
It was
on
you
there.
and Eddie for a while,
Yep.
and then I think, and then you and Mike Long,
Yep.
because Eddie came back out or was supposed to come back out onto the street. And I'm telling you, that was being a cop at that point in time was not easy. It was rough. It was it's literally one of the reasons why I'm not a cop anymore. Those 2 years, my last
Really
2
rough.
years on the Potsdam Police Department, I'm telling you, crushed me.
Yeah.
Mentally, physically, spiritually.
Right.
I was a crispy critter because we were 15 guys short
And that's
Right.
when you end up fighting by yourself, right? For a long
Right.
time.
in a
Right.
A
riot.
long
Right.
time.
Yeah.
In the middle of a
Exactly.
riot.
Right. Good
Literally,
times.
for help.
Yeah.
literally.
Good times.
Right?
So I want to ask a question, but first I want to make a comment. Diane Cherry Crumb says, I worry more about the sidewalks in town, not the drugs or crime. I just thought that was funny because it is. The sidewalks are a danger. What would you say is the number one thing that a borough resident can do to help make Pottstown safer? Other than the obvious, like, don't deal drugs, other than, so what's the number one thing that the middle-aged white lady like me can do to help make Pottstown safer?
Get involved.
Okay.
Get involved in everything. Get involved in block cleanups and rock
Do
the
it.
block, come down for that.
Do it. Like maybe throw a giant party for 10,000 people on the 4th of July. Should I
Right,
do
That
that?
would be important.
Okay.
Maybe my train of thought just went there. get involved in community meetings,
Right.
whether it's the a police meeting, council meeting. There's plenty of meetings
Or
around.
PCA, become a block captain.
Because when you go to meetings and you start talking to people, you're going to realize there's people that are thinking the same thing as you, and they have the same concerns, and that's when you start building alliances.
Right.
Get kids involved. Get kids involved in the block cleanups. Get kids involved in education and different projects to keep them off the street so they
Right.
don't start turning to drugs for
Right.
an easy way to
Right,
make
and
money.
that's where somebody like Dave Charles and his program can be really, really impactful. So it's if you have an hour a week or whatever the mentor program through Strive. I realize that people work and not everybody's able to give their time, but if you do have the time, that 1 hour a week or 2 hours a month or whatever the time commitment is can have such a huge impact.
Yeah.
And we talk about, starting things upstream so that there's not trouble on the streets. That's what I mean, is that if you can help give a kid a positive role model and they don't want to let you down.
I mean,
Right.
that's really one of the most important things you could do is keep the kids involved
Right.
in the community. Love, affection,
Yeah.
sympathy, empathy, like to know that respect other people's property, respect your property, respect yourself. Just teach them everything that they need to learn from the community.
Right.
I mean, really get them involved.
Right. And like Trinita always calls us, her village. The village needs to step up because some of these kids, through various factors, don't have that at home for whatever reason.
Right.
So the village needs to step up and take care of our own.
There are kids in Potstown that are just surviving.
Right.
They're just surviving.
Right. And we certainly saw that through the pandemic. There's kids that aren't getting food. They're not eating. They're not going to school, so
Right.
they're not eating. And not aware of where the food distribution was, they're just barely surviving. So we need to take care of our babies.
So I'm just scrolling through the comments that I had from Iowa and Potstown that led to this conversation tonight. And from what I can see, we've covered all of the bases in one way, shape, or form. We've also answered some people's questions and concerns as they come up during the chat. So I feel like we did what we promised to do.
All right. Thank you.
And
Thank
I think
you.
you did what you promised to do.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
And by we, I
Appreciate
mean
it.
everyone
Right.
sitting here at this
Right.
So we
table.
did a good job,
Yeah,
right?
I
Yeah.
think so.
Let's just pat ourselves on the back a little bit. Yeah.
Good.
But also, people need to know that you are available. You've said,
Yeah,
email me,
absolutely.
call me, drop by. As long as you're not in a meeting, you'll talk to somebody. Come to a borough council meeting and talk to the chief before or after. You don't GET if you don't ASK. So you gotta make your concerns known and ask. The worst that could happen is you could say, I'm not so sure about that. Let me look into that. Or let me see what I can do. Or let's see if we can find a way to solve this problem. But you're not going to get any result if you don't ask and nobody's going to read your mind. You gotta go out and ask for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you wanted to cover that you feel like we didn't cover? I'm trying to wrap up. We're a little bit over, but we still have plenty of watchers. I mean, still have a record amount of watchers. Is there anything that because
No,
Amy and I talk a lot.
I think we covered everything. I'll tell you while I have the opportunity, I want to thank the men and women of the Potsdam Police Department, because I'm going to tell you what, they are some of the most dedicated and hardworking people I've ever worked with. They don't complain. They don't file grievances. They go out and do their job. And I'm telling you, we ask a lot of them. The police administration asks for do this, and do this. And when you're done, do some more. And literally nobody complains. And at least not that we hear of it.
Right.
Okay. Our sergeants, we have a great group of sergeants. They're all veterans. And I got to say, during the pandemic, we pretty much stayed business as usual. So our guys were still out there when everybody was locked down. The Potsdam police we actually had extra patrols. We had more foot patrols, especially in the downtown, to ensure the business's safety and also the community safety. But during the pandemic, even the civilians that work in the police department, the women in records, detective secretaries, our CPOs, they came to work every day. Nobody complained. Nobody said they were worried about their safety, worried about their health. They just came and did their job. So while I have the opportunity, I'm going to thank you.
So
I think living in a small, well, I'll call it a small town, but like I've called 911 several times for police or for an ambulance. We are very fortunate to have a very fast response time from the police department, from the fire department, from the ambulance.
Yep.
I've called on all of those services before and feel very fortunate that within 3 minutes, those services are at my door.
So when I was, there's two things, and I'll chime in here again on your response time question. When I was a patrolman, I was actually called on by my sergeant to help collect some data to respond to a citizen's complaint about call time. It was when I was working for Rathgeb. Rathgeb was my sergeant, and we had, my squad in particularly had taken some calls and some citizen complaints about the police taking too long to get there.
Yeah.
And Rathgeb and myself, along with Captain Thomas at the time, actually pulled our dispatch cards and went through the records. And what we found was, on average, my squad at that time was responding to calls. We actually had it down to the second, but it was 2 minutes and 58 seconds was my squad's response time.
It's a good response.
It was a super good response
I always
time.
found that the longest part of making a 911 call was getting through the dispatch, like it goes through the county or however it works. That's always the longest part. But then you're hearing the sirens soon enough, and you guys are on the scene.
They get people on their way.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that Tracy Longfraney, she had put up a question about wanting to see school zones, traffic control around school zones. We did kind of address that when we talked about establishing the stop signs and things of that nature. So I'm just going to reiterate, and then you can chime in if I'm missing something.
Okay.
It requires a traffic study, one.
Well, a school zone is automatically defined by the area around the school, right? Or
Correct.
is she talking
She's
about?
talking about she wants the lighting and the signage to go up. So anytime, but we talked about this in reference to stop signs, we talked about it. But any kind of traffic control sign requires certain studies to be conducted. So we did kind of talk about that.
Yep.
We also talked about the fact that if people want something in their particular neighborhood or around their elementary school, that they need to approach the police department and talk about it. But what am I missing?
So when I read that, Lieutenant Long and Sergeant Hatfield went out and they checked all the schools. We have school zones in front of all our schools. I thought that we did. Matter of fact, Lieutenant Long provided me with some information that in 2019, we just finished improvements on all the school zones, from whether it's stop signs, stop bars, crosswalks. One thing we could look into is maybe digital speed signs. We have one on West High Street in the 1200 block. We have one on Jackson, and we bought a couple more. Maybe it's something that the school district maybe would be interested in purchasing.
Do the school zones have
the $14 million underfunded school
you're right.
district?
Yeah. So the school zones.
We could work together and try to
Good catch.
Do they have like with schools at the beginning of the school day, the end of the school day, during a school zone, you're not, it's like 15 miles an hour. Are there lights like up by Pius, like in Lower Pottsgrove? There's on Kime Street during certain times of day. There's the lighted signs that like flash and tell you to go 50 miles an hour because it's one of those times a day when you need to slow down.
Yeah, I think maybe that's probably what she was talking about.
I
the
think so,
flashing
too.
lights and the poster speed and that kind of stuff.
Right.
Flashes 15 miles an hour.
No, it's one of those yellow signs. It says school zone, and then it says 15 miles an hour when flat. It's not one of the.
He just told you what it
But
was,
but
and
it's
then
not-
you
I thought-
disagreed
no,
with
I
him.
thought you
Wait a
meant one of-
second.
I thought
He's
you
the
meant-
cop. He's the cop.
I thought you meant one of the digital signs that like tells you what your speed is.
Yeah, that's what he was talking
Oh, and
about.
that's not what I'm talking about.
I mean, when it says speed limit is
Yeah.
15 miles an hour.
Yes, not the one that tells me how fast I'm going.
Right.
Right. The one that starts flashing between 3 o'clock and 3:45 because that's when school is out.
Right.
That's like just drive up Kime Street. That's what I'm talking about. Up there.
So Tracy, what I heard was that Sergeant Hatfield and Lieutenant Long are working on it, and they have worked on it since 2019.
Yeah, the grant actually finished in 2019 with all the improvements. I actually brought the paper with me. I
Okay.
can give it to you.
So Tracy, you might want to reach out to Sergeant Hatfield or Corporal, or not, he's not Corporal anymore, Lieutenant Long. I'm
Lieutenant
sorry.
What'd you say?
I said Corporal.
Oh,
He's Lieutenant Long.
Lieutenant Long.
Yes.
I'll tell you what Lieutenant Long's email address is. It's
Go ahead.
pd122
Yep.
at potstown.org.
Yes.
pd122 at potstown.org. That is Lieutenant Long.
I'll give it
Special
to you so
operation.
you can see it if you want to look at the
Right.
improvements that were done in the school zones.
So Elizabeth Devaney was just bringing up a point of if somebody calls the police department to report something happening in their neighborhood, they might be hesitant to make that call because they think there might be some retaliation. Like I'm going to narc out my neighbor who's there's some suspicious activity, but I don't want my neighbor to know that it was me that called.
Uh-huh.
Right. So it's anonymous, right? When I call, you're going to ask they're going to ask for my name and
Yeah.
phone number, but they're not going to go to the person I'm reporting and say, "Hey, Amy Wolf just narked you out."
No,
Right.
no, they're not going to. You can
You-
remain
you would-
anonymous, but it's very difficult to deal with anonymous information.
Right.
Um,
Right. So the police are asking for your name and your information in case they have to follow up with you.
Yep.
But they are not going to share that information with anybody that you are reporting or with anybody else.
I'll take it a step further, and this is going to go to address another concern that Mick cannot talk about. But
Okay.
again, I will, and that goes to discipline, how police officers are disciplined. I can tell you, and this is after 15 years of law enforcement, and I worked for 3 different agencies at the county, federal, and local level.
Right.
If an officer got caught giving out that information, it would literally be the end of your
End
career.
of their career. Right. That's it.
You would be immediately brought up on disciplinary charges.
Right.
Serious disciplinary charges. If you did something that leaked information that caused someone to become hurt or have a crime committed against them or hurt another police officer, you can forget about it.
Right.
You're toast.
Right.
Toast.
Yep. So perfectly safe to call and report what it is that you're seeing of concern. All right. It's
Here's what I'm
7:30.
going
Are we
I
going to
know.
wrap it up?
We still have 20 people watching. Yeah,
I know.
we'll start wrapping it up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to convert these into some pictures.
Okay.
And this is the information that the chief gave me about the work that they did and the money that they spent to update various traffic signs and crosswalks and school zone signs. I'm going to post this up on
Cool.
Matt Green at Glocker Real Estate so people can go and look at it.
Yep.
Chief handed me this. This is all public record. I'm not
Yep.
giving away any state
Right,
secrets.
correct. Very good.
So yeah, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in.
Thank you.
I know that there was a lot of nervousness about people abusing this platform. From what I was monitoring in the chat, everything was polite.
Yeah, it was
It was
great.
cordial. It was civil. I think we got a lot of good information out to people. I think we helped people understand maybe some items and some issues that they didn't fully understand before.
Mhm.
At the very least, we gave them the backstory on some of this stuff.
Right.
Some more things to consider as we move forward in this journey of trying to make Pottstown a better place to live, right? So I think they did a good job. I want to thank the people from Eye on Pottstown. They were integral in
Yep.
collecting this information and letting us use their platform to collect comment from the community.
Yep.
And like I said before, I just want to echo the chief's words. This is the beginning, folks, right?
Yep.
Mick has plans of revamping the community meetings
Yep.
and having them on a regular basis.
Yep.
Yeah,
So come out.
we are.
Well, yeah. Once you
We're gonna-
announce that, we'll announce it on the
We're going to
show.
try
And
and break it down smaller, maybe break it down by ward and have the council person there with us.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We can't have one big one. We had
Yeah.
one big one in 19 and it was a
It
little
got
bit
too much.
overwhelming.
unwieldy. Yeah.
But it gave people the opportunity to vent and talk a little bit, so that was good. But we'll break it down smaller.
So here's my request. You and I are now linked together on some emails.
Mhm.
Once you get those meetings established,
Okay.
just shoot me the date and time and location of them. And we're going to add that to
Yep.
the news and events here
Definitely.
on Porchcast
Great.
Pottstown.
Thank you.
We absolutely want to help you get the word out about what the Potsdam Police Department is doing in our community. So that's the promise that I'm going to make to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Very
you
appreciate it.
for coming on the show. It's been really great. And I will apologize to anybody that gave me news to share this week. We'll definitely do it next week or the week after.
Just one more time, I'm going to put the Potsdam Police Department sign back up there along with the PD121 at potstown.org. That's the chief's email address. He has said it multiple times during the course of this hour and 37-minute interview. Reach out to him, contact him. He wants to hear from you. The chief, for those that don't know, is Michael Markovich. He's been in Pottstown for 27 years altogether.
Altogether, almost 27, yeah.
That's a lot. That's more than some of the people that complain about you.
Yeah. I know. That's all right. That's all right.
We're Porchcast Pottstown. We've been live at the Potsdam United Brewing Company. It's 251
Thanks for
East
everyone
High
that
Street.
came down in person. It's been
We
fun.
had a pretty good crowd tonight. I see Officer Steve Dice in the crowd. Good to see you, brother. Don't forget to patronize Pub. They give us a 4-top every Thursday. Don't charge us any money.
I know we hog up this table for
We-
4 hours.
Right. All we ask is that you come down here occasionally and buy some beers and some food and help support this local business because they're helping us and we are trying to help you.
Yep.
All right. The hosts of the show, Matt Green and Amy Wolf. We're the hosts of Porchcast Pottstown. If you have something to tell us, you can contact us through the email address potstownreports@gmail.com. We are collecting questions, comments, and critique.
If you just want to tell us how much you love us, that's cool too.
I did forward everything that came in to Porchcast from Pottstown Reports. Is that true?
Yes.
You got
I got
everything.
Yes.
I sent it to the chief.
You did.
Spammed them with it.
Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. I will let the people know who aren't regular watchers. The YouTube platform is a much better platform to go back and watch the old episodes.
Yep.
It's easy to search. It's easy to find. Go to YouTube, search Porchcast Pottstown. There's 75 episodes posted up there. It's not going to be hard to find the interview with Mick Markovich. It's there right now, and it will live there forever.
Forever and ever. Amen.
Thanks for tuning into Porchcast Pottstown.
Thanks,
We
everyone.
appreciate your support. Have a good evening.